My dad wanted me to lend him my life savings of $40,000 to cover his gambling debt. Be loyal to your father. My name is Courtney, I'm 31 years old, and I'm from a small town in Ohio. For most of my adult life, I'd been working toward one simple dream: to finally have a home of my own. Not a fancy mansion. Not some luxury condo with rooftop pools or marble countertops. Just a cozy, modest little house where I could plant a garden, paint the walls any color I wanted, and wake up each morning knowing that it belonged to me. That dream kept me going through long shifts waiting tables, working late nights as a receptionist, and picking up side gigs whenever I could. I skipped vacations, birthday parties, and nights out so I could save every extra dollar toward my future. So, if you like the story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It helps to grow our channel and it motivates me to make more interesting stories for you. And I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location and your local time in the comments below. For as long as I can remember, I'd had this image in my head. Me standing on a front porch, a cup of coffee in my hands, listening to the birds. No noisy neighbors blasting music at 3 a.m. No landlord raising the rent without warning. No sharing paper-thin walls with strangers. Just peace. I used to scroll through real estate apps late at night, saving listings I loved and making little plans for what I'd do when I moved in. I could almost smell the fresh paint and the scent of new beginnings. By the time I turned 31, I had done it. I had saved $40,000, enough for a down payment on a small home in my town. I felt so proud every time I checked my savings account, seeing that number inch higher month after month. That money wasn't just cash in the bank. It was years of sacrifices. It was my future. But I guess no amount of planning or saving can prepare you for the people who will try to tear that future apart. Even the ones you least expect. Especially the ones you least expect. My dad had always been this larger-than-life character. The kind of guy everyone loved at barbecues. The one telling stories, cracking jokes, making everyone laugh. People always said I was lucky to have such a fun dad. And I suppose as a kid I believed that too. Thought he was cool. He'd let me eat ice cream for dinner, or he'd pick me up from school blaring classic rock with the windows down. But behind the charm, behind the jokes, there was always a darker side. I learned to spot it early. The times when he'd come home smelling like beer, when his voice would get too loud, or when he'd disappear for hours with no explanation. My mom would make excuses, telling me he was working late or helping a friend. But I knew. Even as a kid, I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't until I was older that I understood the truth. My dad had a gambling problem. What started as poker nights with friends turned into weekends at casinos, then into bookies and bets he couldn't afford. I watched him burn through our savings, max out credit cards, and pawn off anything of value. My mom tried to hold things together, but there's only so much one person can do. Eventually, she gave up trying to hide it from me. We both just lived with the quiet chaos that followed him everywhere. I thought by moving out, by building a life on my own terms, I could leave all of that behind. And for a while I did. Kept my distance. Focused on my job, my goals. But some people have a way of dragging you back into the mess, no matter how far you try to run. It was a Thursday night when my phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I was tired, I had work early the next morning, and I wasn't in the mood for whatever drama might be on the other end of that call. But something in me, maybe habit, maybe guilt, made me pick up. My dad's voice was frantic, rushed. He begged me to meet him. "Please, sweetheart, I'm in trouble. I just need to see you. Just talk to me. Please." I could hear the panic in his voice, and against my better judgment, I agreed. I met him at this dingy little diner on the edge of town, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a broken jukebox that hadn't played a song in years. When I walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked older, worn down, like the weight of the world was crushing him. His hands shook as he gripped his coffee cup. He didn't waste time with small talk. The words came tumbling out of him in a rush. He owed money. A lot of it. $40,000 to a bookie who, according to him, wasn't the type to just send polite reminder notices. There were threats, scary men showing up, phone calls at all hours. And then came the part that made my stomach twist. He wanted me to give him my savings. All of it. The money I'd spent years building, penny by penny, sacrifice by sacrifice. The money that was supposed to be my way out, my new beginning. He leaned across the table, his eyes desperate. "You're my daughter. You're supposed to help me. Family sticks together. You can't just let them hurt me. Please, Court. Be loyal to your father." For a moment I just sat there, frozen. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. This was my dad, the man who was supposed to protect me, not the one asking me to destroy everything I'd worked for to cover his mistakes. I tried to explain. Tried to tell him I couldn't. That this was my future, my only chance at something better. But he wouldn't hear it. The more I said no, the angrier he got. His voice rose, drawing stares from the few other diners scattered around. He called me ungrateful, selfish. Said I owed him. After all he'd done for me, this was how I repaid him. I left that diner with my heart pounding, tears stinging my eyes. I felt torn in two. Part of me wanted to help him, to make it all go away, to be the loyal daughter he demanded. But the other part, the part that had learned, over years of broken promises and heartache, knew I couldn't. I wouldn't. In the days that followed, the pressure only grew. My mom called, begging me to reconsider. Other family members chimed in, telling me that I was his only hope, that this was what family loyalty meant. I started getting texts at all hours, voicemails I couldn't bear to listen to. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. That night at the diner was just the beginning of a storm that would test everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what it really means to stand up for yourself. So, if you like the story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It helps to grow our channel and it motivates me to make more interesting stories for you. And I'd really love to know where you're watching from. Share your location and what time it is for you in the comments below. Your support means the world. At first glance, my dad seemed like the kind of man everyone wanted in their lives. He had this way of making people feel seen, like they mattered. He'd walk into a room, and suddenly everything felt lighter, funnier, warmer. When I was little, I thought he was magic. He could get the most serious teachers at school to smile just by cracking a joke. At family gatherings, he was the one people gravitated toward. His voice carried over the crowd, full of life, always telling a funny story or teasing someone in a way that felt playful instead of mean. I remember birthday parties where he'd turn the backyard into a carnival. He'd set up games with prizes he won at work, which I would later learn came from who knows where, and he'd be the ringleader, leading my friends in scavenger hunts or silly obstacle courses. On those days, I felt like the luckiest kid in the world. Who else had a dad who was this fun, this full of energy? But even then, when I was still small enough to believe in the magic of it all, there were moments when the spell would break. Little cracks in the perfect picture that I didn't have the words to describe at the time. I just knew that sometimes after everyone went home, my mom would look tired in a way that no amount of sleep could fix. Sometimes when my dad was in the middle of one of his big performances, holding court at the grill or making people laugh at a neighborhood block party, I'd catch a glimpse of her standing off to the side, watching him with an expression I couldn't quite name. There were the nights he didn't come home, too. At first, those nights were rare, and they always came with an explanation that sounded reasonable enough. Work ran late. He got caught up helping a friend. His car broke down and he didn't want to wake me up with a call. But the older I got, the more I started to notice the patterns. The smell of whiskey on his breath when he did come home. The way he'd slip into bed and pretend like everything was normal, even though the clock on my nightstand told a different story. His business trips became a running joke in our house, at least for him. He'd pack a bag and head out with a grin, promising souvenirs and postcards, but those trips always seemed to happen right after a big argument with Mom or right before the bills were due. When he came back, he'd have some small trinket for me. A snow globe, a keychain, once even a stuffed bear, as if that could make up for the days of silence that hung over the house while he was gone. I remember the first time I really saw one of his so-called friends up close. I must have been around 10. It was a Saturday afternoon, and he brought this man home with him, a man whose name I've long since forgotten. The guy was polite enough at first, shaking my hand and ruffling my hair, but there was something about him that set me on edge. Maybe it was the way his eyes darted around, like he was always watching for something. Maybe it was the way his laugh felt forced, hollow, like it didn't quite match the smile on his face. They disappeared into the garage for hours that day. When they came out, Dad was in one of his good moods, the kind where he'd order pizza for dinner and let me stay up late watching movies. But I remember the way Mom's jaw tightened when she saw them, and how she barely touched her food that night. Over time, the charm that had once felt so magical started to feel more like a trick. I began to see how he used it to get what he wanted. When money was tight, which it often was, he'd sweet-talk his way out of late fees, convince friends to cover his tab just this once, charm his way into little favors that added up to a lot. And it wasn't just strangers he worked his magic on. There were countless times he guilted Mom into bailing him out of one mess or another. "Come on, babe, you know I didn't mean for this to happen. Don't you trust me? After everything I've done for this family, this is how you treat me." His voice could shift so easily, from playful to wounded, from joking to angry, that it left you dizzy. And he did it to me too, in smaller ways at first. Promising to come to my school recital and then not showing up, only to tell me later that something really important had come up, and didn't I understand? Making me feel selfish for being disappointed. Convincing me to cover for him with Mom when he stayed out late. "You're my girl, right? You've got my back." The first few times I said yes because I wanted him to be proud of me. Because I wanted to be the daughter he believed I was. But each time I did, I felt a little more hollow inside. There was this one night that sticks out in my memory more than any other. I was around 12, old enough to know something was off but not old enough to really fight back. I woke up to the sound of voices, raised, tense. I crept out of bed and tiptoed down the hall, stopping just before the kitchen. My parents were arguing, their words low and sharp, like they were trying not to wake me but couldn't help themselves. "I can't keep doing this, Mark," my mom said. Her voice cracked in a way that made my chest ache. "We don't have it. We're behind on everything. And you're out until 3 in the morning. With who? Doing what?" Dad's response came fast, like he'd been waiting for the chance to pounce. "Don't start with me, Lisa. I'm out there trying to fix things. Trying to get us ahead. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? Always looking at the worst in me." I heard a chair scrape against the floor, the sound of footsteps. I held my breath, heart pounding, terrified he'd see me standing there. But he didn't come down the hall. Instead, he lowered his voice, but not enough that I couldn't hear. "I'm doing this for us. For Courtney. Don't you want her to have a better life than we did? I'm out there trying to make that happen, and all you can do is tear me down." It was the first time I recognized the pattern for what it was. The way he twisted things, made it sound like his mistakes were noble sacrifices. Like he was the hero of the story, and we were just too blind to see it. In the daylight, he'd act like everything was fine. He'd take me for ice cream or show up at school with a surprise lunch. The other parents loved him. My friends thought he was the coolest dad around. And part of me clung to that version of him, the one who made me laugh, who made ordinary moments feel special. But in the quiet hours when it was just us, the weight of his choices filled the house like smoke, impossible to ignore. Those harmless poker nights he joked about. They weren't so harmless. I'd catch bits and pieces of conversations, hear the names of people who gave me chills, see the tension on my mom's face when he said he was going out. There was always a promise. "I'm due for a big win. This time it's different." But the only thing that seemed to change was how deep the hole got. By the time I was in high school, I'd stopped waiting up for him. I'd stopped believing the promises, the excuses, the grand plans that never amounted to anything. I focused on my grades, on getting out, on building something that couldn't be taken away by a bad hand of cards or a shady deal gone wrong. Still, no matter how hard I tried to separate myself from it, I couldn't completely. Because he wasn't just some charming man with a dark side. He was my dad. And for all his faults, for all the ways he hurt us, there were moments when I saw the man he could have been. The man I wished he was. And that hope, that tiny spark, made it so much harder to let go. Looking back now, I can see how easy it was for people to be fooled by him. How easy it was for me to be fooled for far too long. His charm wasn't just an act. It was his armor, his weapon, and his prison, all at once. And it took me years to stop falling for it. Years to see that real loyalty isn't about covering for someone's lies or cleaning up their messes. Real loyalty is about honesty, respect, and care that goes both ways. It's about wanting what's truly best for the people you love, not just what's best for you. And that's something my dad never quite understood. It was a Thursday night. The kind of night where everything felt calm on the surface, but underneath, a storm was brewing that I didn't see coming. I remember it so clearly because it had been one of those rare evenings where I let myself relax. I'd finished work a little early, treated myself to takeout, and was curled up on the couch scrolling through house listings. I had a playlist humming softly in the background, my mind wandering as I imagined what it would feel like to finally have a place of my own. Each listing I saved felt like a promise to myself, a reminder of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed. That's when my phone rang. At first, I considered letting it go to voicemail. It was late, and I didn't recognize the number. But some instinct I couldn't name, made me reach for the phone anyway. I swiped to answer, pressing it to my ear with a quiet hello. And then I heard his voice. My dad. But not the confident, joking tone I was used to. Not the voice that could charm its way out of anything. His voice was frantic. Chicky. He spoke in a rush, tripping over his own words, like he couldn't get them out fast enough. Courtney. Please. Need you. I need to see you. Right now. Please, baby. Froze. My heart started pounding. My mind raced through possibilities. Was he hurt? Was Mom okay? Had something happened to someone in the family? Dad, what's going on? I asked, my voice rising with panic. Just please meet me. The old diner. You know, the one off Main. Can't talk over the phone. Please. Before I could press him for more, the line went dead. I sat there for a moment, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, staring at the screen like it might give me answers. My gut told me I should stay put. That nothing good ever came from these late-night emergencies with my dad. But the part of me that still hoped, still wanted to believe in him, grabbed my keys and my jacket and headed out the door. The drive to the diner felt like it took forever. My thoughts raced, weaving between worry and dread. I kept glancing at the clock on the dashboard, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. When I finally pulled into the nearly empty parking lot, my stomach was in knots. The place looked as run down as ever. A flickering neon sign buzzed in the night, and inside only a few booths were occupied. I spotted him immediately. He was slouched at a corner table, his head down, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug. My breath caught when I saw him. He looked broken. His hair was messier than usual. His clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. He didn't look up until I slid into the seat across from him. Dad, I said, my voice soft but trembling. What's going on? He lifted his head, and the desperation in his eyes hit me like a punch to the gut. His hands trembled as he set down the mug. I'm in trouble, sweetheart, he said, his voice hoarse. Bad trouble. I waited, silent, as he ran a hand through his hair and glanced around the diner like he was afraid someone might overhear. I owe money, he said finally. A lot of money. My heart sank. The kind of sinking you feel when you just know that your world is about to change and not for the better. How much? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. He hesitated, then whispered, $40,000. $40,000. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. To who? I managed to ask. He avoided my eyes. A bookie. It was supposed to be a sure thing, Court. Swear. I got in over my head. My mind reeled. $40,000. That wasn't just a bad bet. That was ruin. That was danger. That was the kind of debt that didn't just go away. They're threatening me, he continued, his voice cracking. These guys aren't messing around. I don't know what to do. I need help. I sat there frozen. I wanted to believe this was some kind of nightmare I'd wake up from. But the look on his face told me it was all too real. Then he said the words that made my blood run cold. You've got money. I know you've been saving. You can help me. You can get me out of this. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. No, I whispered, shaking my head before he could even finish. No, Dad. I can't. You're my daughter, he said, leaning forward. His voice growing more urgent. You're my blood. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate. You have to help me. Please. My mind raced. All I could think about was that savings account. The money I'd scraped together from years of late nights, skipped vacations, saying no when I wanted to say yes. Also, I could finally have something that was mine. Home. Security. Future. And now he was asking me to give it all up. I looked at him. This man who had once seemed larger than life, now crumbling before me. And I felt torn clean in two. Part of me wanted to help him. How could I not? He was my father. The man who used to sing to me when I was scared of the dark. The man who taught me how to ride a bike, who cheered the loudest at my high school graduation. The man I had loved my entire life, even when he made it so hard. But the other part of me, the part that had seen the broken promises, the lies, the damage left in his wake, that part knew the truth. If I gave him this money, it wouldn't save him. It wouldn't fix anything. It would only drag me down into the mess with him. Dad, I said, my voice shaking. This is my future. I've worked so hard for this. I can't just give it away. His face twisted, hurt turning to anger in an instant. After everything I've done for you, he snapped. This is how you repay me. I'm your father, Courtney. Your father. I flinched at his tone, the venom in his words. I'm sorry, I said, tears burning in my eyes. I can't. We sat in silence then, the weight of everything hanging between us. The hum of the diner's lights, the clink of dishes from the kitchen. It all felt distant, like I was watching the scene from somewhere outside my own body. Finally he stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Fine, he said, his voice cold. Forget it. And then he walked out, leaving me sitting there, heartbroken and hollow. That night my savings account stopped feeling like mine. Because even though I hadn't given him the money, the shadow of what he'd asked for, of what he'd tried to take, lingered. I drove home with tears streaming down my face, realizing that no matter how hard I tried to build something for myself, his mistakes would always find a way to reach me. And that was the night everything changed. I thought the hardest part was saying no to him that night at the diner. I thought that if I could just find the strength to refuse him, to stand up for myself and protect the future I'd worked so hard for, that would be the end of it. But I was wrong. That night was only the beginning. What I didn't realize as I sat there in that cracked vinyl booth, watching my dad storm out into the dark, was that he wouldn't fight this battle alone. He had an army waiting in the wings. And that army wore familiar faces. Started with my mom. The very next morning, before I'd even had a chance to gather my thoughts or sleep off the exhaustion from the emotional storm of the night before, she called. Her voice on the phone was soft, but there was a tension underneath it that set my nerves on edge. Courtney, she said like she was testing the water. Your father came by late last night. He's upset. He said you wouldn't help him. I felt my heart sink. I'd hoped, foolishly, that maybe he wouldn't drag her into this. That maybe, somewhere deep down, he'd realize this wasn't her burden to bear either. But of course he had. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can't give him that money. You know what that money is for. You know how hard I've worked for it. There was a pause on the line, and when she spoke again, I heard the tears she was trying to hold back. I know, honey. You do. But he's your father. He's scared. We're all scared. These people he owes, they're not good people. I don't know what they'll do if he can't pay. And there it was. The first stone thrown. Not by my dad this time, but by the woman who'd always been my safe place. The woman who'd held our family together through every storm he created. I can't, Mom, I whispered, feeling the guilt rising like a tide I couldn't stop. She didn't argue. Not directly. But she didn't have to. Her silence said enough. That was just the start. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. My aunt, who'd always been the one to bring the macaroni salad to every family barbecue, called me with a voice dripping in sugar but laced with guilt. "Sweetheart, I hate to get in the middle of this," she said, "but your daddy's in real trouble. He's always been so good to you. Can't you find it in your heart to help him this once?" Then it was my cousin Megan, who I hadn't seen in months. A message on Facebook. "I don't know the whole story, but it's tearing the family apart. Maybe you should just give him what he needs so everyone can have some peace." That word rang in my ears like a cruel joke. Because that's all I'd wanted my entire life. And now they were dangling it in front of me like some prize I could win if I just handed over my hard-earned future. What they didn't see, or maybe chose not to see, was that this wasn't just about money. It was about everything that money represented. It was about boundaries, about finally drawing a line in the sand and saying, "No more." But they didn't see that. Or maybe they didn't care. Even my younger brother got involved, though he never came right out and said it. He just stopped answering my calls, stopped texting me back. I could feel his disappointment like a weight on my chest. We'd always been close, or as close as siblings could be in the kind of household we grew up in. But now, even he had turned away, leaving me to stand alone against the storm. And then there were the family dinners. If you've never sat through a meal where every fork scrape against a plate feels louder than it should, where the silence is so thick it's hard to breathe, you wouldn't understand. I went stupidly hoping for normalcy, hoping maybe if I showed up, if I played along, the tension would ease. But it didn't. I sat there, picking at my food, while my mom filled plates and tried to make small talk about the weather or some neighbor's new dog. My dad sat at the head of the table, avoiding my eyes, his face a mask of wounded pride. No one said it out loud, but it was there in every glance, in every too long pause between sentences. I was the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the one who could fix everything with a stroke of a pen but chose not to. They didn't see the sleepless nights I endured. The way I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with what if they were right? What if something terrible happened to him because I said no? Could I live with that guilt? Would it haunt me forever? And yet, every time I thought about caving, I remembered what that money meant. I remembered the overtime hours, the nights I skipped dinner to save a few extra bucks, the birthdays I spent working double shifts because I had a goal and nothing was going to stop me. I remembered the promises I'd made to myself, that I would build something better, that I would break the cycle. But the pressure was relentless. I started to dread my phone vibrating in my pocket. I silenced it more often than not, unable to handle another call filled with guilt, another message that twisted the knife just a little deeper. I stopped going to family events altogether, too drained to face the looks, the whispers I imagined behind my back. And maybe they weren't imagining it. Maybe they really did think I was heartless, selfish, cold. I spent so many nights sitting alone in my apartment, wondering when it would end, wondering how long I'd have to hold the line before they gave up or before I broke. And the truth is, I came close. So close. There were moments where I pulled up my banking app, staring at that number on the screen, thinking about how easy it would be. A few taps, and the problem would go away. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. It wouldn't go away. Not really. Because if I gave in now, it would only open the door for the next time. And there would be a next time. That's what no one seemed to understand. This wasn't just about $40,000. It was about every bad decision my dad had ever made, every mess he'd left for someone else to clean up. It was about setting a boundary that should have been set years ago. And as hard as it was, as isolating and painful as it became, I held firm. Because I realized something during those long, sleepless nights. Family loyalty doesn't mean sacrificing your well-being for someone else's mistakes. It doesn't mean handing over your future because someone demands it. Real loyalty, real love, they're built on respect, on trust, on honesty. And those were things my dad had lost a long time ago. I'm not going to lie and say that made it easier. Didn't. But it made it possible. Possible to get through the calls, the messages, the dinners filled with unspoken accusations. Possible to keep my hands steady and my resolve intact, even as my heart broke a little more each day. Because at the end of the day, I wasn't just fighting for my savings account. I was fighting for myself. The pressure from my family was hard enough, but I could handle the guilt trips and the silent treatment. What I wasn't ready for, the part that no one warned me about, was what came next. Fear. The constant, gnawing dread that began to shadow every part of my life. The way the consequences of my dad's choices started creeping into my world in ways I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I tried to convince myself I could stay out of it. Began with the cars. First, I thought I was imagining things. I'd come home from work and pull into the parking lot of my apartment complex, and there would be a car I didn't recognize parked just a little too close to my building. Some beat-up sedan with tinted windows, the engine idling long after I'd gone inside. Or an SUV that seemed to always be there when I left in the morning, its driver staring down at a phone, but never seeming to actually make a call or send a text. I tried to brush it off. Told myself I was being paranoid. After all, I lived in a city. People parked where they could. Maybe they were waiting for someone, or maybe they were just taking a break. But no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, the feeling wouldn't go away. That prickling on the back of my neck, that sense that I was being watched. It wasn't just my apartment either. I started noticing the same kinds of cars near my office. Parked across the street from the building where I worked, the drivers staying inside. Sunglasses hiding their eyes even on cloudy days. I told myself it was coincidence. What else could I do? The alternative, that they were connected to my dad's mess, that they were watching me because of his debts, was too terrifying to fully accept. But denial only worked for so long. The moment that shattered any illusion I had of being safe came one evening, just as I was leaving work. I'd stayed late to finish up some paperwork, hoping the extra hours would distract me from everything weighing on my mind. The office had emptied out hours earlier, the halls quiet, the parking lot nearly deserted. I stepped outside, grateful for the crisp air, and started walking toward my car. That's when I saw him. He leaned against the hood of a car I didn't recognize. An old, dented thing with out-of-state plates. He was tall, his jacket zipped up to his chin, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Felt my pulse quicken. I kept walking, telling myself to stay calm. I didn't know him. I didn't need to engage. But as I reached for my door handle, he spoke. "You're Courtney, right?" I froze, my hand hovering over the door. "Who's asking?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but I could hear the tremor in it. He smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the kind that sent chills down my spine. "Friend of your dad's. Just wanted to have a word." I didn't respond. My instincts screamed at me to get in the car, to lock the doors, to drive away. But my feet felt rooted to the spot. "Look," he continued, his tone casual, too casual. "I get it. Family stuff can get messy. But your old man's got obligations. Important ones. The kind that don't go away just because someone's feeling stubborn." His words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. "I don't have anything to do with that," I said, my voice small. He nodded like he understood, like he was trying to be reasonable. "Sure. But sometimes, people need a little reminder. A little encouragement to do the right thing. I'm just here to give that reminder." And then he pushed off the hood of his car, tipped his cap, and walked away. As if we'd just had a normal conversation about the weather. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat there for what felt like forever, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded in my ears. Felt sick. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, heard his voice. I kept replaying the moment, trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood, that it hadn't been a threat. But I couldn't. I knew what he meant. I started jumping at shadows. Every car that drove too slowly down my street, every knock at my door, every unfamiliar face in the grocery store, they all set my nerves on edge. Kept my curtains drawn. I double-checked my locks. I avoided going out after dark unless I had no choice. I thought about calling the police. More than once, I picked up the phone, my finger hovering over the buttons. But then I'd stop. What would I even say? That some man I didn't know spoke to me outside my work. That strange cars were making me nervous. And worse, what if making that call only made things worse? What if it was seen as me escalating, as me betraying my family? The thought of that was almost as frightening as the thought of doing nothing. I felt trapped. In the quiet hours of the night, when sleep wouldn't come, I started researching. I read everything I could about gambling addiction, about loan sharks, about what happened to people who got in too deep. The stories were all the same in the end. It started small, harmless bets, poker games, nights at the casino. And then the debts piled up. The desperation set in. The people they owed didn't care about excuses. And the families got caught in the crossfire. I read stories about children whose parents lost everything, about wives who worked 2 jobs to pay off debts they didn't create, about homes seized, lives ruined, about threats that turned into violence. The more I learned, the more the fear grew. I realized just how deep my dad was in. This wasn't just a bad streak. This wasn't just a bit of bad luck. This was a hole he'd been digging for years, maybe his whole life, and now he was buried so deep he couldn't see the way out. And me. I started to wonder if I was next on the list to be hurt. Because it wasn't just his debt anymore. His mess had spilled over into my life, pulling me into the undertow. And no amount of saving, no amount of hard work, no amount of good intentions could shield me from the choices he'd made. I kept trying to tell myself that if I just kept my head down, if I just stayed out of it, it would all blow over. But deep down I knew better. This was only the beginning. It was almost midnight when I heard the pounding on my door. Not a knock pounding. Heavy fists slamming against the wood hard enough to rattle the frame. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze where I stood in the kitchen, staring at the door like maybe, if I stayed still enough, whoever was on the other side would go away. But the pounding came again, louder this time, more insistent. "Courtney!" I heard him shout through the door. "My dad." His voice was slurred, raw with anger and desperation. "Open up. We need to talk." I felt my stomach twist. I'd been expecting this in some way. After everything, the diner, the phone calls, the stares from strangers who weren't really strangers, I knew it was only a matter of time before he showed up. But knowing it didn't make me ready. I moved slowly to the door, every step heavy. My hands shook as I reached for the lock, then stopped myself. I didn't have to open it. I could leave it locked. I could tell him to go. But I knew he wouldn't leave without a scene. My neighbors didn't need that. I didn't need that. So I opened the door. Just a crack. The smell of alcohol hit me immediately. Whiskey, strong and sour, clung to him like a second skin. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair disheveled, his shirt untucked and stained. "Dad," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "It's late. You can't be here like this." He shoved at the door, forcing it open. I stumbled back, heart racing, as he stepped inside. "Don't start with me," he snapped. "Don't you dare start with me. I'm your father. And I need your help." I closed the door behind him, my fingers lingering on the knob like maybe I could still escape. He swayed on his feet, pointing a shaking finger at me. "I can't believe you," he said, his voice rising. "You have the money. I know you do. And you're sitting on it while I'm out here begging. Begging my own daughter." "Dad, stop," I pleaded, trying to keep my voice calm, trying not to let the fear show. "You need to go home. Sleep this off. We can talk tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" He barked a bitter laugh. "There's no tomorrow, Courtney. Don't you get it? These people, they want their money now. And here you are, acting like it's not your problem." I felt the tears prick at my eyes, but I blinked them back. I couldn't cry. Not now. Not in front of him. "You've always been like this," he spat, the anger in his words cutting deeper than any knife. "Ungrateful. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me. I gave you everything, and you can't even do this one thing for me." His words hit hard, not because they were true, but because they echoed all the little ways he'd made me feel small my entire life. In that moment, memories flooded in, uninvited and relentless. I saw myself as a kid, standing by the window waiting for him to come home, promising myself that this time he'd show up when he said he would. The disappointment that always followed, the excuses that never quite added up. I saw the times he'd forgotten school plays, parent-teacher meetings, birthdays. The way he'd sweep in with a smile and a gift and a charm offensive that made me feel guilty for being upset. I heard his voice in my head, the soft manipulations wrapped in affection. "You're my girl, right? You wouldn't want to hurt me, would you? Come on, Court. Just this once. For me." The way he'd turned my love for him into a tool he could use whenever he needed something. And here he was again, drunk and angry, demanding I sacrifice myself to clean up his mess. Something inside me cracked. "Get out," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. He didn't hear me. Or maybe he did and chose to ignore it. He kept ranting, pacing my small living room, knocking over a lamp in his agitation. "You think you're better than me," he snarled. "With your little job, your savings account, your fancy plans. Let me tell you something, Courtney. You wouldn't have any of that without me." I stepped forward, my hands clenched at my sides. I said, "Get out." He stopped, stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. His face twisted, confusion mingling with fury. "Don't do this," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't turn your back on me. I'm your father. And I'm your daughter." I shouted, the words ripping out of me. "Your daughter who has spent her entire life picking up the pieces you left behind. Who has spent every day trying to be good enough to be worth something, while you threw everything away." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. "I can't do it anymore," I sobbed. "I won't." We stood there, the silence between us louder than anything he'd said. Finally he turned, staggering toward the door. "This isn't over," he muttered as he left, slamming the door behind him. And then I was alone. I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs. The weight of everything crashed down on me all at once. The fear, the guilt, the heartbreak of realizing that the man I'd spent my whole life trying to please would never change. That night I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the dad I'd wanted him to be. Not the dad I'd made excuses for, forgiven, defended. Just a man. A deeply flawed, broken man who had taken and taken until I had nothing left to give. Drawing that line, kicking him out, it felt like tearing myself in two. But I knew it had to be done. Because sometimes, the hardest thing in the world is realizing that loving someone doesn't mean you owe them everything. And that saying no, drawing a boundary, isn't betrayal. It's survival. The days after that night felt like living in the eye of a storm. Everything was too quiet, too still, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next disaster. My father didn't call. He didn't text. There was no apology, no explanation, no effort to smooth things over the way he usually did after a blow-up. He just disappeared. At first, I kept glancing at my phone, expecting it to light up with his name. Some small part of me, the part that hadn't given up on him yet, thought maybe he'd sober up and realize how far he'd gone. Maybe he'd reach out, say he was sorry, promise to change. But the days turned into weeks, and there was nothing. And it wasn't just him. The ripple effect hit my family fast. Some relatives didn't say anything at all, but their silence felt like a verdict. Like they'd chosen their side, and it wasn't mine. Others weren't so subtle. My aunt, the same one who'd called me before to gently guilt me into helping, left a voicemail dripping with disappointment. "I don't know what's happened to you, Courtney. He's your father. He's always done his best. And now, when he needs you most, you turn your back on him. It's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking. As if I hadn't spent every night since that awful confrontation feeling like my heart was shattering piece by piece. Even some cousins I thought might understand kept their distance. There were no more check-in texts, no more invitations to family gatherings. I was the black sheep now, the one who let her father suffer. But not everyone turned away. My mom called one night, her voice soft, tired. "I'm sorry," she said. Just that at first. "I'm sorry this is happening. I wish I could make it better." She didn't pressure me, didn't tell me what I should do or what would fix things. Just listened as I cried, as I told her how scared I was, how lost I felt. And then there was my older cousin Rachel, the one who'd always been more like a big sister. She texted late one evening, "I'm proud of you. What you did took strength. If you ever need anything, I'm here." Those words felt like a lifeline. But even with that small support, I felt adrift. Work became nearly impossible to focus on. My job, once my refuge, felt like another place where I was constantly on edge. I'd sit at my desk, staring at my computer screen, unable to concentrate. My mind was always somewhere else, looping through worst-case scenarios. Was he okay? Had he spiraled even deeper? Were those men, the ones who'd cornered me, who'd parked outside my home, still watching, still waiting? Every time the phone rang, every time someone came into the office unannounced, I jumped. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting one of his so-called friends to show up again, demanding what my father couldn't give. The fear was exhausting. But what weighed on me even more was the guilt. I kept wondering over and over, what if something happens to him? What if he gets hurt, or worse, because I didn't help? Would I be able to live with that? Would I always be the daughter who turned her back when it mattered most? And yet, no matter how many times I asked myself those questions, I always came back to the same answer. Giving him the money wouldn't have saved him. It wouldn't have solved the problem. It would have just delayed the inevitable and dragged me down with him. Still, knowing that didn't make it any easier. After a few more sleepless nights, I decided I couldn't keep living like this, trapped in fear, waiting for the next shoe to drop. I made an appointment with a lawyer, someone recommended by a coworker who didn't know the details but could see I was stressed beyond belief. Sitting in that office, explaining everything to a stranger, felt surreal. But the lawyer listened without judgment. She helped me understand how to protect myself, how to secure my savings so it couldn't be touched, how to set up safeguards on my accounts. She talked me through what to do if things escalated, if the threats became more than just words. Then I went to see a financial advisor. I told him too, as much as I could without falling apart. Together we made a plan, one that helped me feel like I was taking back control, even just a little. But no amount of legal advice or financial planning could fix what hurt the most. It was the grief that caught me off guard. Not grief for the father who'd disappeared from my life, not really. It was grief for the man I'd thought he was, the father I'd spent my whole childhood hoping for, defending, believing in even when he didn't deserve it. That man wasn't real. Maybe he never had been. And letting go of that illusion hurt more than I can put into words. I found myself thinking back on moments from my childhood, moments I'd always clung to when I needed to remind myself that he loved me. The way he'd push me on the swing at the park, higher and higher until I felt like I could touch the sky. The time he stayed up all night helping me build a model for the school science fair. The way he'd wink at me across the dinner table when Mom wasn't looking, making me giggle until my sides hurt. But now those memories felt tainted. Because I couldn't separate them from the lies, the manipulation, the damage he'd done. And I hated that. I hated that he'd taken even that from me. Some nights I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to reconcile it all. Trying to make sense of how someone could be both the man who made me feel safe as a child and the man who made me feel so unsafe now. And always the same question echoed in my mind. If I don't help him and something happens, will I live with that guilt forever? I didn't have an answer. Maybe I never would. But I knew this. I couldn't help him without destroying myself in the process. And I was finally starting to understand that I mattered too. So I kept going, one day at a time. I focused on work, on the small tasks that helped me feel grounded. I leaned on the few people who stood by me. I kept reminding myself that setting a boundary wasn't cruelty. It was survival. And as hard as it was, as lonely as it felt at times, I held on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward breaking free of a cycle that had kept me trapped for far too long. After weeks of sleepless nights, countless moments of doubt, and the heavy weight of guilt pressing down on my chest, I realized I couldn't do this alone anymore. The stress, the fear, the grief, I was drowning in it. I woke up each morning feeling hollow, dragging myself through the day, barely able to function. The person I saw in the mirror didn't look like me anymore. My face was pale, my eyes ringed with dark circles. I felt fragile, as if one more phone call, one more pointed comment from a family member, one more knock at the door could shatter me entirely. It was Rachel, my cousin, who gently nudged me toward therapy. One night, after I'd broken down crying on the phone with her for what felt like the 100th time, she said quietly, "Courtney, you don't have to carry this alone. There are people who can help you learn how to let go." And that's how I found myself sitting in a softly lit office one Tuesday afternoon, across from a woman named Linda. She was warm but direct, with kind eyes that made it a little easier to speak the truth I'd been avoiding for so long. I told her everything. The debt, the threats, the way my father had stormed into my apartment that night. I told her about the guilt, about the nights spent wondering if I was a terrible daughter, about the fear that I'd failed the one man who was supposed to be my hero. Linda listened without judgment. And when I finished, she said something that made my breath catch. "Courtney, it sounds like you've been living in survival mode for a long time. And now that you're trying to break free, it feels like the ground beneath you is crumbling. That's normal. But you are not wrong for setting boundaries. You're brave." It was the first time anyone had called me brave. I'd felt anything but. I felt selfish, weak, heartless. But as I kept going to those sessions, I started to see things differently. Linda introduced me to the concept of codependency, and the more I learned, the more I saw my life reflected back at me. I realized how deeply I had tied my worth to my ability to rescue my dad, to make things okay for him. I saw how I'd been conditioned to feel responsible for his happiness, his failures, his messes. I saw how I'd spent years thinking that love meant sacrifice, that being a good daughter meant putting his needs above my own, always. And I saw how that had to stop. Every week I felt a little stronger. I started practicing saying no, not just to my dad but in small ways with everyone. I stopped answering calls from family members who only reached out to guilt me or shame me. I began reconnecting with friends I'd pushed away during the chaos, friends who reminded me who I was before all this, who saw me as more than my father's daughter. One of the biggest wins came the day I finally opened up my saved list of house listings again. I'd avoided them for so long, too afraid to hope, too afraid that dream was gone forever. But I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in hand, scrolling through pictures of cozy living rooms and sunlit kitchens. And for the first time in months I felt something like excitement. That dream was still mine. It always had been. At work I started focusing again. The constant sense of dread slowly ebbed, replaced by cautious optimism. I didn't jump every time my phone rang. I didn't scan the parking lot for unfamiliar cars. And through it all, I kept hearing Linda's words in my head. Saying no to him was saying yes to you. Because that's what I was doing. With every boundary I set, with every small act of self-care, with every step I took toward building my own future, I was saying yes to myself. Yes to peace. Yes to growth. Yes to the life I deserved. Meanwhile, my dad's situation grew worse. Word filtered through the family that he was still spiraling, drinking more, gambling when he could, dodging the people he owed. There were whispers of him losing what little he had left, of more fights, more burned bridges. And as much as it hurt to hear, as much as that old instinct kicked in to run to his side, I didn't. I held the line. I reminded myself that his choices were his, and no amount of sacrifice on my part could save him from himself. I grieved that too. Grieved the father I'd wanted him to be. Grieved the relationship I'd once believed we had. But I didn't waver. Couldn't. Because for the first time I was learning what it meant to choose myself. I filled my time with things that nourished me. I started going for walks in the evenings, breathing in the cool air, watching the sunset paint the sky in soft pinks and oranges. I joined a book club. I picked up cooking again, experimenting with new recipes, filling my apartment with the comforting smells of simmering sauces and fresh bread. Each of these things felt small on the surface, but together they rebuilt me. I started imagining what my home would look like when I finally found it. I pictured cozy furniture, walls lined with bookshelves, A little garden on the balcony. I allowed myself to believe that I could have that life. Not because someone gave it to me, not because I bought my way out of guilt, but because I earned it. Therapy helped me see that breaking the generational cycle wasn't about turning my back on my family or abandoning the people I loved. It was about refusing to let their choices define me. It was about carving out a space where I could thrive, where I could build something lasting, something healthy. There were hard days, of course. Days when the guilt crept back in, whispering in my ear that I was selfish, that I should do more, give more. Days when I missed the father I thought I had, the one who sang me lullabies and cheered at my school plays. But those days became fewer, and the voice of guilt grew quieter, replaced by a stronger, steadier voice, the one that belonged to me. Saying no to him was saying yes to me. It was the hardest, most painful lesson I've ever had to learn. But it was also the most liberating. And as I continued to heal, to grow, to dream again, I realized something beautiful. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finally living. It's been nearly 3 years since that night when I stood in my apartment, shaking, with my father's angry words still echoing in my ears. 3 years since I drew the hardest boundary of my life, told him to leave, and chose myself for the first time. I've thought about that night so many times since then. Sometimes it comes back to me in dreams, other times it sneaks into my mind when I least expect it, when I pass a father and daughter laughing together at a coffee shop, or when I hear an old song that he used to play on the stereo. But the woman I am now is not the same woman who opened that door to him that night. I'm sitting here now in my own home. It's nothing fancy, nothing that would make it into the pages of a glossy magazine. It's a small house on a quiet street with creaky floors and windows that rattle a little when the wind blows hard. But it's mine. Every inch of it, every corner I've filled with books and plants and photographs of people who truly love me, every wall I've painted with colors that make me feel calm. It all belongs to me. Getting here wasn't easy. That first year after I set my boundary with my dad was the hardest of my life. There were moments when I questioned everything. When the guilt gnawed at me so deeply I thought I might give in. When I worried, truly worried, that I was the villain in the story my family told about me. That maybe I really was the cold, ungrateful daughter who turned her back on her father. But as time went on, I saw the truth more clearly. I saw how that guilt wasn't mine to carry. How I had inherited it, like a heavy, invisible burden passed down through generations. I saw how my dad's choices had shaped our family in ways no one wanted to admit. And I saw, most of all, how much strength it took to break that cycle, to be the one who said, "This stops with me." My relationship with my father now is almost non-existent. I hear bits and pieces about him through relatives. I know he's still struggling, still making the same choices, still blaming everyone but himself. There have been no grand reconciliations, no dramatic apologies, no tearful reunions. And maybe that sounds sad to some people. Maybe it even sounds cold. But for me it's peace. I've made peace with the man he is, and with the fact that I can't change him. I've made peace with the fact that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself to them. It doesn't mean accepting harm, or sacrificing your future to save them from their own mistakes. What I've learned is that loyalty, real loyalty, is rooted in love and respect that goes both ways. It's not blind. It's not about enabling someone to hurt themselves or you. It's not about carrying someone else's weight while your own knees buckle under the strain. For so long I thought loyalty meant saying yes. Saying yes to the demands, yes to the guilt, yes to the sacrifices that left me hollow and resentful. I thought it meant giving until I had nothing left, because that's what a good daughter did. But I see it differently now. Loyalty means showing up with honesty. It means setting boundaries that protect both people, not just one. It means being willing to tell the truth, even when it's hard. And sometimes it means stepping back, even stepping away when staying would destroy you. If you're reading this and you're where I was, if you're trapped in that tug of war between what your heart wants to give and what your soul knows you can't, I want you to know this. You are not alone. And you are not a bad person for choosing yourself. Doesn't mean you don't love them. It doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. It means you're brave enough to protect your own heart, your own life. It means you're trying to build something better, something healthier, for yourself, and maybe for the generations that come after you. There are still days when I miss the dad I thought I had, the dad I wanted him to be. Think I always will. But I don't miss the chaos. I don't miss the fear. I don't miss the endless struggle to prove myself worthy of his love. Now my life is quiet in the best way. I come home at the end of the day and step into a space that's safe, that I've made my own. I cook meals in my little kitchen, sit out on my porch in the evenings with a cup of tea, watch the world slow down as the sun sets. I have friends who feel like family, who show up for me without asking for pieces of my soul in return. And most importantly, I have myself. Took losing so much to find that. To find the strength I didn't know I had. To realize that saying no to him, heartbreaking as it was saying yes to me. Yes to healing. Yes to growth. Yes to hope. If I could go back and tell that younger version of myself one thing, it would be this. You are not responsible for saving him. You never were. And the moment you stop trying is the moment you finally start saving yourself. That's what I hope anyone reading my story takes with them. That no matter how tangled up you feel in loyalty and love and guilt, you can choose a different path. You can choose peace. You can choose yourself. And when you do, you'll discover a life waiting for you that's fuller, richer, and more beautiful than you ever imagined.